lot of the younger executives today have never been through it. And trust me when I tell you, there's nothing better than experience to help in a situation when things go bad.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate the advice to everybody that's listening. And this show is about getting people off their butts, B-U-T apostrophe S's, and out there doing something. So thank you for, letting people know how they can break into your business in the right way. What I'm very passionate about, and this show is going to take a turn right now, is you are a 9/11 survivor, literally. And, I heard that term earlier today in relation to your name. And I just, you think about that, especially if you were around paying attention for 9/11 and what that means. Can you tell us about that day and what happened to you and what's happened to you since and the changes that have happened in your life because of 9/11?
Yeah, it's a day obviously that I'll never forget, and it really changed my time lifeline. The first thing I'll always remember that day, it was a perfect day.
Yeah.
The weather was just gorgeous. It was crisp. It was completely clear. And I remember driving in to work, and I park in the South Tower, which is one of the two taller towers, Tower 1 and 2, with the two trade centers, and you had satellite buildings around them. And I was going to go up to breakfast because I invented this club for the exchange, which was the Windows of the World Breakfast Club. And I went over to the express elevator, and we got breakfast for free every day up there. And it was a beautiful way to start the day. And you read a paper, you look over, the skyline, and it was a real peaceful way to start before a really hectic day on the trading floor. And I walked over, and there was an issue with the express elevator or something, and they said you have to take the local. And I was lazy. I didn't want to go up to 56, I think I was, and cross over and wait and then go back up. So I crossed the street. And I went into my office and I sat down, and all of a sudden we saw the cars on West Street turning around, and we didn't know what it was. So my father calls me up and they said, well, they think a Cessna hit the building.
Mm-hmm.
So I go, hold on. So I ran out and I took a look through a window, and then I saw it on TV. I'm like, no, it's not a Cessna. It's like this 13 floors missing. So we weren't really sure what was going to happen or what was really going on. And then all of a sudden, a little while later, he's on the phone with me, and this is a guy that never panics. And he screams, get out of the plane, because he could see the plane was just going over. If you ever look at the footage, our building was right on the west side. And, it was us and American Express and then the World Trade Center. And he screamed, get out of the building. And all of a sudden, the next plane hit, the alarms for the building went off. We all congregated downstairs. You could literally feel the heat from the flames from where we were,
mm-hmm.
Watching people jump, looking at each other, holding each other's hand, because they figured I'd rather jump than get burned. I knew that I had a bunch of people that from my clearinghouse and the exchange were in the towers at the time, plus the people at breakfast. I ended up losing 24 people. But what ended up happening is when the first building fell, we were down there, and I remember looking at my friend that started running, and I'm like, what? And he points up, and you could see the tower had cracked and started sliding down on itself, and I could see the roof kind of like sliding down by where there was a hotel. And we went running up West Street, and I remember how surreal it was, and then we just kept going. And around 15th Street, I looked, and I saw one tower just standing there. And that to me still bothers me, because I see the one tower now. Believe it or not, it was less strange with no towers than with one tower.
Yeah.
And then I watched the tower, come down, and only to find out that they did a story a couple of years later about one of the people from my clearinghouse that was a friend of mine that was on the phone with his wife saying that, it was like World War III up here and take care of the kids. And then all of a sudden the line went dead and the tower went down, and I realized that he was alive when the tower went down.
Yeah.
And, so, it still affects me to this day, but what most people don't know, and, what the incredible thing is that, I had a friend of mine who's now very ill from this. He, this guy, Richie, he went down because we needed to see if our building was still open because, the chairman at the time, this guy, Vinny Viola, who was a former, West Point, graduate, colonel, now a very successful, electronic trader, and he owns the Florida Panthers. But, he was chairman at the time, and he got a call from Washington saying that world oil prices were going crazy and gold prices, and we had to get up. There was no electronic trading during the day back then. And he called a board meeting that night. Richie went down, saw the building was still standing, and we were there about a day later. They were dropping generators. I'm writing a book on this. Dropping generators on the roof, puddles of oil all over the place. That Vinny and some other people were walking through. We were looking for other alternative sites, but he got the whole board together and really ran it like a military operation. And it wasn't like the stock market. Stock market, nothing happened to because the buildings kind of fell into West Street and West. So all our communications were out, and we knew that we had 24 people that were missing. And I remember that we were down there, and it was surreal. I mean, obviously the smell was just something that will never go away from me. I had one of 5 passes from the mayor of New York at the time that I was allowed really to the pit where everything was, and I remember you never looked up at the wreckage. It was almost eye level because everything fell in. And one of the firefighters said to me that he's never seen concrete turn back into its original form.
Mm-hmm.
And I just looked, and I'm like, there's just nobody coming out of there alive because there was even the furniture just got disintegrated. So we got the exchange up and running, and what people didn't know is that for the first month or two before Goldman stole our boats, which is a whole nother story, is that we brought 1,000 people a day down by ferry up over the wall into the building secretly, and the exchange was secretly open for 3 months during the cleanup. So you had the rescue workers and the cleanup workers there, and a block and a half or 2 blocks away was us quietly sneaking in and out of the building. And then when Goldman said that they would pay twice as much for their boats, we had to work out with the city that we were allowed to walk through Ground Zero every day to get the people in and out, and we had special passes, and that made it a little bit more horrific, a little bit more personal, and it ended up being such a mindset that to be able to function in the pit, knowing what was going on outside, knowing that the world was kind of depending on us to stabilize the prices, and knowing that we lost so many people was truly, an event that changes your life forever.
Yeah.
And I had to get, this thing called EMDR therapy to handle, the issues with the post-traumatic stress. But it also enabled me, and what I tell people in anything they go through in life, and I've gone through a few different events that have changed my life, is that you have to use these things as confidence builders to build on, to say, if I got through that, I can get through anything. And what I always teach in my lectures and the people that I work with is that there's no such thing as a bad day. A bad day is when you don't come home. You might have a frustrating day. You might have a tough day. You might have a headache. You might have all this stuff going on. But I know what a bad day is, not for me, but for the people that didn't make it home.
Yeah.
And I really try to instill that. And, on all the anniversaries for 9/11, I was down there, and it still hurts. But what's amazing is that this younger generation is looking at 9/11 like I looked at Pearl Harbor. It was it's becoming a footnote in the history books. And that's a little disheartening, but it's understanding. People move on. History gets further away, and we got to be there to kind of tell about history and explain about what it's all about. And I was a board member of the Tribute Center for a while, for about 3 years, and everybody in the Tribute Center had to be attached to 9/11 in some way, shape, or form. And we went around and took everybody on tours, and we told our stories of that day and the people that we lost, and we kept all those people alive in our thoughts.
It's just I'm in awe hearing your story and thinking back on that day and what it must have been like, and the fact that you could go to work and really, you're keeping trade alive for the world, which is an important task because you want economy to fail based on your inability to do what you do. I couldn't fathom what it must have been like, and I really appreciate you sharing your story because I think it needs to be told once in a while. we're 18 years away from that. And to me, it seems like it was yesterday, and I'm sure it feels the same to you.
I still see visions of that building coming down and the people jumping. I still see it a couple times a day. It still haunts me, and
Yeah.
at the weirdest times. Just when you wouldn't think about it, it just literally, just like watching a movie in front of my eyes. Sometimes it comes back. And when these other people go through these horrific events, like the Parkland shooting and so many other events that have happened in the country over the past couple of years, there have been times I've literally walked into my house, gotten in the bed, put the covers over my head because it just brings everything back. And I know what these people are going through with what true fear is. And first, the true feeling of that you are not in control. And it is truly the most humbling experience that you will ever have.
Well, again, I appreciate you sharing your stories. I want to get back to the business side of things and where you're at today. I've taken the time to look through some of your videos on Instagram. I love the one titled, "I've had my ass kicked pretty good." I know in that you talk about, mentally walking through what you just talked about and then pulling your pants back up and going to work. I mean, some days you just have to do that. You told me about your eye trauma and some of the things that you've gone through there. Just your resilience to get back to work. What is your driving factor? What keeps you going every day?
Well, basically not allowing anything to say that it's going to take me down. I mean, you talk about my eye trauma, and what people don't realize, because I fake it pretty well, especially on TV, is that I had a crazy 1 in a million eye infection, followed by a cornea transplant, and then 4 minutes after I walked out of the shower, when they told me I could take the shield off that protects your eye, I walked into my closet. I took a T-shirt, I pulled it off the hanger spun, snapped, hit me in the eye, and ripped everything out.
Jeez.
And as they rushed me to the hospital, I'm like, really? Like you got to be kidding me. And they ended up fixing it to a point, but then I had 9 retina tears, and I slowly went blind in my right eye, which is my dominant eye, over the last 5 years. But I've also dealt with having a headache every day for the last 5 years. And the thing that keeps me going, is when you look at 9/11 and you see that it could be worse. I always have this saying, and people always wonder, how do you have the mindset that you have? And because I have body pain and everything from some of the stuff that I breathed in and all this other stuff, and it's very simple. If it's not fatal, we can figure this thing out. And that's what people have to understand. I mean, my mother died of cancer at 55 years old. And, that is fatal. That is pressure when you're standing next to somebody and they're trying to chemo, that the side effect is an instant heart attack, and they got the crash cart standing there, and you're all watching it be administered slowly, and you're looking at the numbers. Well, will the heart attack happen or not? Well, that's real pressure. And what I try to explain to people is, if your kids are healthy and you're doing okay, the rest of the stuff can all be worked out. And that's where the mindset has to be. I mean, I hear some people complain, and I look at them, I go, really? I go, you've got to be kidding me. And my problem is I have no filter at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the first one to look at somebody and go, you got to stop this. I've been at dinner tables and said, you got to be kidding me. It would be like me complaining to a blind guy that I can only see out of one eye, right? I mean, the blind guy would look at me and say, you've literally got to be kidding me. And that's what I make sure that I keep perspective. And people in general have to keep perspective on what's good, what's important. And the bottom line is, if your family's healthy, everything else can be worked out.
David, I'm like you. I believe the same things. I haven't been put in harm's way like you have in that circumstance. I put myself there through some of my hobbies. But I try to tell people that, and sometimes you feel like it falls on deaf ears because, they feel like their smaller problems are the weight of the world on their shoulders. How do we convince them that things can be figured out, that they can work through those problems, with with different methods that are available to them, or even utilizing some of the cliches that we hear out there every day. You think about Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. If every morning you feel, you write down that you're going to be wealthy, eventually you're going to bring wealth to you, right? How do we convince